Meta recorded $56 billion in revenue in a single quarter. Revenue up 33% year over year, one of the best quarters in the company's history. Weeks later, it laid off 7,000 to 8,000 people. And Meta isn't the odd one out. Microsoft is profitable and cutting. Alphabet is profitable and cutting. Amazon is profitable and cutting. Across the industry, more than 100,000 tech workers lost their jobs in the first few months of 2026 alone, at companies that were at that exact moment making more money than they ever had. So the usual explanation, the company's in trouble, they had to make cuts, doesn't work here. Nobody's in trouble. The numbers are great, which means something else is going on. And when you look at where the money actually went, the answer is uncomfortable, specific, and hiding in plain sight on every one of these companies' balance sheets. So, where did the money go? Here's the frame I want you to hold on for the rest of this video because it flips the whole story. Most people assume layoffs are a cost-cutting move. The company needs to spend less, so it spends less on people. But that's not what's happening at the biggest tech companies right now. What's happening is closer to a financing move. The company isn't trying to spend less, it's trying to spend more, enormously more, on something else. And payroll is where it's finding the cash. That something else is AI infrastructure, data centers, chips, compute. I'm going to walk you through 3 things: how big that spending actually is, why the market rewards this, and the part where AI genuinely is changing the work. And then I'll give you the honest review at the end, because this story gets oversimplified constantly and I don't want to add to that. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers are genuinely hard to believe. Tech giants like Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, Google, also known as Alphabet, Meta, and Oracle are driving a historic boom in data center leasing, spending billions to lock down vast energized spaces. Because power constraints limit self-building, these companies are aggressively securing massive build-to-suit campuses and wholesale co-location spaces across the US. The 4 major tech companies mentioned earlier have committed to spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 to $800 billion on capital expenditure in 2026. Capital expenditure is the money a company spends on physical stuffs such as buildings, equipment, and infrastructure. That's up roughly 77% from the previous year, which was a record in itself. And it isn't going into offices or retails or stock buybacks. It's going almost entirely into data centers, custom chips, GPUs, and the machinery to run AI models. Now, let me make that number land, because 700 billion is too big to fail. Take Meta on its own. Its 2026 infrastructure budget is somewhere in the range of $115 to $145 billion, depending. Meta's entire payroll, every single employee, every salary, every engineer, every manager, everyone, cost the company roughly $27 billion. Sit with that for a second. The infrastructure bill is 4 to 5 times the cost of the entire human workforce, which means if Meta fired every employee it has tomorrow, every last one. It will save $27 billion against $145 billion check. So when a company like that lays off 8,000 people, it's not solving its budget problem. It can't. 8,000 people is a rounding error against that infrastructure number. The math simply does not work. What it's actually doing is freeing up cash flow and moving it from one focus to another. Mark Zuckerberg reportedly told employees directly that the May cuts were a consequence of the AI infrastructure budget, not that an algorithm had taken their jobs, that the company had chosen to buy GPUs and data centers instead. And this isn't just Meta being blunt. Analysts at TD Cowen looked at Oracle's cuts and estimate they freed up 8 to $10 billion in free cash flow, money that flows straight into GPU purchases and data center constructions. Their read was explicit. This wasn't AI optimization, it was a capital transfer from payroll to infrastructure. This one made headlines just days ago. A Bitcoin mining company, CleanSpark, signed a 20-year data center lease worth $6.6 billion at its campus in Sandersville, Georgia. But they wouldn't name the tenant. All they say is it's a high investment grade global technology company, and if 2 5-year extensions get exercised, that deal could climb to $11.6 billion. Alright, that's the first reason. The data centers have a bill. The bill is astronomical. Payroll is where the cash is coming from. Okay, but that leaves a massive elephant in the room. If saving a few bucks on payroll doesn't actually dent a multi-billion-dollar AI bill, why do the layoffs at all? Why not just eat the cost out of your massive profit and keep your people? Because of how Wall Street reacts. There is this weird, almost dystopian rule in the stock market. A company announces massive job cuts and almost instantly its stock price jumps. Logically, that feels wrong. Fewer workers should mean less productivity, right? But investors aren't looking at the human toll. They are looking at those eye-watering infrastructure bills. Spending $140 billion on AI data centers is a terrifying gamble. Naturally, shareholders start panicking that management is just setting money on fire. A layoff is the ultimate damage control. It's a giant signal to the market that says, don't worry, we aren't being reckless. Look how disciplined we are. Take Meta's recent cuts. One analyst basically admitted that Wall Street didn't view the layoffs as a sign of distress at all. It was the exact opposite. They saw it as a sign of confidence that the company was keeping its core costs on a tight leash. Think about the perverse incentive that creates for a CEO. You are trying to pull off this massive career-defining bet on AI. You know the price tag is going to scare people. To keep the market from panicking while you pull the trigger, you throw them a bone. You pair the terrifying spending numbers with the layoff announcements. It balances the scales. It gives investors the exact narrative they want to hear. At that point, the layoff stops being about those 8,000 people or their actual day-to-day work. Their jobs are literally just being used as a PR tool to send a message to the boardroom. It's brutal, but that's exactly what happens when your only incentive is keeping the stock chart moving up. Part 3. The work. Now, for the third force. This one is completely real, but it gets blown out of proportion constantly. So let's look at what's actually happening. AI genuinely is taking over some of the workload now. Not all of it, and definitely not most of it. Just a specific chunk, the routine, predictable end of it. Take a look at the data. Stanford's AI Index found that employment for software developers aged 22 to 25 dropped by nearly 20% since 2024. And those cuts weren't just random bad luck. They hit a very specific type of work: boilerplate coding, scripted testing, routine bug fixes. Basically, the exact tasks current AI tools can handle without breaking a sweat. You see the exact same pattern outside of engineering. The roles getting asked are clustering around customer support, Q&A, content moderation, and layers of middle management. Notice the common thread there. They are all jobs where the tasks are well defined and repeatable, which is exactly what AI thrives on. But here's the twist that completely complicates the AI is taking our jobs headline. And honestly, that's the most revealing statistic in this whole video. At the exact same moment these record layoffs were happening, there were roughly 275,000 AI related job openings sitting completely empty in the United States. Unfilled, companies reported a massive 92% spike in hiring for AI jobs, offering huge wage promotion premiums to anyone who could fill them. So the tech sector isn't actually shrinking. In total numbers, it's not even really shedding headcount the way it looks from the outside. It's swapping. It's laying off in one column and hiring desperately in another. And the real human tragedy here is that the workers being let go are almost never the ones qualified for the new roles. A content moderator or a Q&A tester can't just become a machine learning infrastructure engineer over a weekend. That skills gap is incredibly wide, which is why telling people to, in quotes, just learn AI is such a useless, frustrating piece of advice. Look, let's be totally honest here, because this story gets flattened into cheap headlines all the time, and that flattening does real damage. If you think AI is the only reason for these layoffs, you are missing the bigger picture. Depending on which tracker you look at, AI is explicitly blamed for anywhere between 20% and 55% of 2026 tech layoffs. That is a massive spread, and that gap is the real story. A lot of tech executives have figured out that blaming an AI restructuring sounds way better to Wall Street than admitting, hey, we completely misjudged our market growth. Analysts call it AI washing. And to be fair, some of this is still just the old hangover from the 2020 hiring boom, back when these companies expanded aggressively, assuming the pandemic era digital spike will last forever. That correction drove the brutal 2023 wave, the biggest layoff year on record, with 250,000 jobs lost, which is about 250,000. But guys, that was 3 years ago. Executives have been recycling that same excuse every single year since. At some point, it stops being a correction and just becomes a corporate strategy. The truth is a mix of everything. You have some genuine AI displacement at the lower levels, a bit of leftover pandemic bloat, and a massive amount of capital being deliberately moved from human payrolls to computing power. AI is just the convenient excuse that makes the whole thing sound like an inevitable force of nature rather than a conscious choice. So let's zoom out and connect all three pieces. First, the bill. Four massive companies dropping $700 billion into data centers and chips. A number so massive it makes their entire employee payroll look like pocket change. The four massive companies are the ones which end up taking most of the parts, but other companies are following in its stead. Second, the market. Layoffs act as the general discipline signal that keeps nervous shareholders happy while the company makes that massive gamble. Third, the work. AI is actively absorbing routine tasks while the industry frantically tries to hire for specialized AI roles it can't fill. When you stack all of that up, you realize the tech industry isn't collapsing. It's making the largest, most concentrated infrastructure bet in human history, and is financing a chunk of that bet right out of its own workforce. Us. If there's one takeaway from all of this, is this: these layoffs aren't a sign that the money ran out, they are a sign of where the money went. And understanding that difference completely changes how you look at your own career. If you think the industry is dying, you panic. If you realize it's just reallocating, that there are 275,000 open roles sitting on the other side of a massive skills gap, you plan completely differently. The tech world isn't spending less on the future, it's spending more than it ever has. It's just decided that the future is going to be built out of silicon rather than staff or human labor. Hey there, guys, this is Ethel Explains, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.